Alright guys, back to our bench. We have a new addition to the family, this beautiful St. Croix icon rod, review coming up soon. We already reviewed the Daiwa Presso, which is by far my favorite ultralight rod ever. We also reviewed the Shakespeare Microlight, which is by far again the best rod for the money, and actually even regardless of money, even though this rod costs only $20, is one of the best rods on the table anyway. So check out the review of that rod if you haven't seen it. And today we're gonna review a new release from Shimano, which is very nice that Shimano would release something for, pan fishing as well, not just bass fishing rods, because that's where all the money is. But they released this brand new Shimano Sensilite. Okay, so that's what we're gonna look at today. This Shimano Sensilite rod, MSRP is for $60, but you can find it for $50 here and there, but you're not gonna get it cheaper than that. As with all Shimano products, they don't have deep discounts like you can get from Cabela's or Bass Pro when they're on sale. So keep in mind when I compare it with other rods, it is a $60 rod MSRP, so it should compare with something like Daiwa Presso, which is also $60 MSRP. The impression that you get from the first look at the rod is that it's, slim, looks kind of high performance, but not really that good looking. The butt cap looks kind of nice, but it has this rim over here that I'm afraid will collect dirt if you put it on the ground. I much prefer the butt of the Daiwa Presso that it just won't collect anything. The quality of the cork is deplorable. Easily the worst on the table. I mean, can you compare to the Daiwa Presso? No. They're both sealed, by the way, and it looks much better now. I'll show you how it looked before I sealed it. But yeah, it's worse even than the ACC crappie stick. Look at the other ones. They look much better, and it doesn't have good fit here with the plastic part of the reel seat. So yeah, it's not a good looking handle. The reel seat is very similar to that of the ACC crappie stick, as you can see, but it doesn't have this bulge here, which makes the grip so uncomfortable because it's behind the reel. Okay, so this one is not so uncomfortable, and while the ACC crappie stick didn't put foam on the front, they did put foam. However, the foam is too far from the reel seat to actually be able to rest your hand on it, so you will feel the threads when you hold this reel. That said, it's still okay actually. Like when you hold it and cast with it, you don't notice it and you don't think about it. But if you have to compare it with the other ones, just hold them back to back, then you do notice that the other ones are more comfortable, just because you don't have to touch these plastic threads over here. The locking nut also looks pretty cheap. I mean, it's strong enough because again you're securing a crappy reel. How much stress are you gonna get? So it is more than sufficient, but I mean, it's exactly the same. Look how cheap. It just looks cheap. Exactly the same as on all of the cheap rods, and it just doesn't look nice. Look at the Daiwa Presso again. I mean, it looks like the nuts from the $200 rod. So yeah, just from the point of view of aesthetics, falls a little bit short. Moving forward, we have a hook keeper and we have a made in China label. So Shimano is the only one that put the made in China label right next to the specs of the rod. So when you look at the specs of the rod, you're gonna see that it's made in China. So I kind of respect that, because everybody else puts it over here at the butt where people are not gonna look. talking about the specs, this is a 6'6" one-piece ultralight fast action that is supposed to throw lures all the way down to 1/32. This is what I really liked in the description of this rod. The guides on the rod are aluminum oxide, exactly the same as on this Saint Croix right next to it. And I mean, aluminum oxide is fine, it's very durable and extremely cheap, which is why manufacturers like it so much. I mean, you don't need, very resilient guides when you fish for crappie, because even if you use abrasive line like braid, there is just not a lot of pressure against the guide. So they're not very likely to groove like if you would, do some saltwater fishing for stripers and the fish takes 30 feet on the first run. So the guides are fine with respect to strength and all of that, but they're kind of heavy. And this blank of the Shimano is really good, as I'm about to show you. And this rod would have been something just amazing with lighter guides, like on the Daiwa Presso. These titanium pack bay minima guides on the Daiwa Presso are super light, and the two rods cost about the same, actually almost exactly the same. So why did Daiwa Presso find money for nice guides and Shimano used the cheap guides? So only from this perspective, the rod would feel much more sharp and nimble if they put the Daiwa Presso minima guides on it. So to summarize the bench, guys, I gotta tell you, I'm not impressed with the quality of the components, not talking about the blank, but everything else, the guides, the reel seat, the locking nuts, the cork. This is still a $60 MSRP rod, and it's gonna have some pretty good competition. So far I'm not impressed. Alright, so the components are nothing special, but how is the blank? And the answer is, the blank is really, really good. Shimano says that this is a jigging rod for super small jigs down to 1/32, and this is exactly what this rod is, okay? This rod is perfect for jigging tiny crappie jigs. The recovery on the blank, I mean, there is almost no recovery, okay? Look at this. Very fast recovery. And I can control the tip. Look at this, micro twitches. If I want, I can do micro twitches during the jigging with the rod. So as far as jigging is concerned, you're not gonna find many rods better than this, but you will find some, okay? I have a Browning Airstream rod over there that I got for $40 actually on clearance, but it was also $60 full price. And in all honesty, that rod feels a little bit sharper than this Shimano, okay? So the rod is excellent for jigging, but not really the best. And one more time, I said it on the bench, I think if Shimano put lighter guides on this blank, if they put the minima guides, which again Daiwa Presso found the money in a $60 rod to put minima guides, if Shimano put these light minima guides on this blank, it would have been something amazing, okay? Now, I personally don't do float fishing with short rods because, I mean, you have 2 or 3 feet of depth under the bobber, and then it becomes difficult to cast the whole thing with a 6-foot rod. And since I don't need to jig with the float rods, usually I prefer blanks with much slower recovery that will bend all the way to the handle and just give me the joy of fighting even small fish. So this rod would not be my first, float fishing choice because it's short. But the blank is actually so flexy, look at this, that in a pinch, if I had to use this rod for float fishing, I would absolutely enjoy, let's say, fighting an 8-inch bluegill with this blank, okay? This is why I think this blank is so good. It has the sensitivity and the recovery of a jigging rod, but it has the flex of a float rod if you want to use it for float fishing. Next, let's put some weights on these blanks and see the shape of the curve and the power of the blank underwater. Okay, the first test will be against the Shakespeare Microlight. That is so difficult to beat for the same money. As you can see, now the Microlight is 7-footer, so I adjusted actually the tips of the rods to be aligned. So the handle of the Microlight, if you can see, is sticking 6 inches behind. So the Microlight is light power, this one that I have, and the Shimano Sensilite is Ultralight. But as you can see, they are very, very similar, okay? And the Shimano is maybe just a little bit softer than the Shakespeare rod. But if you got the ultralight version of the Shakespeare rod, they would be identical, okay? So both rods, very similar blanks. And now we're going to compare it against the Daiwa Presso, which is the softest blank that I have. And again, I aligned the tips of the two rods. So the Daiwa Presso has the butt sticking out only a couple of inches here. But as you can see, the Daiwa Presso is softer, but not by much, which talks about how soft the Sensilite is, because Daiwa Presso is the softest blank that I have. And oh, I can't even hold it. But remember, Daiwa Presso is absolutely no good for jigging. Like, you cannot jig with the Daiwa Presso. And the Shimano blank is almost as soft, but you can jig just fine, because the recovery here is very slow. The recovery here on the Shimano Sensilite almost immediate. So yeah, very good blank. Okay, so what is the final word about this Shimano Sensilite? Like we said enough times already, the guides, the reel seat, the lock nut, the cork, not very good, okay? All of the components except the blank are not very good, subpar, if I may say, for the $60 price point. But the blank is really good. Excellent recovery, excellent sensitivity, and at the same time flexy enough so you could enjoy fighting even an 8-inch bluegill. The toughest part about making, the final conclusion about this rod is the value, okay? Can I recommend it at $60? And to make things more complicated, the answer really depends on who you compare it against. If I compare it against the, where did it go? The cheap Shakespeare rod, okay? $20 versus $60, you can get a little bit of discount on both of them. The guides, the same quality. The blank, very similar. Looks, very similar. I don't think the Shimano looks better than this. Maybe a little bit better, but I don't like these thick guides, okay? I think the slim, elegant guides on the Shakespeare rod actually look a little bit better. They're stainless steel, but I like just very thin guides. The blanks, probably the Shakespeare rod looks and feels a little bit more comfortable. But I will admit that the Shakespeare rod is not as good in jigging, okay? The tip doesn't feel quite as sharp as on the Shimano rod, but it's really close, even there, okay? And this is the 7-footer. If you get the 6'6" and compare with 6'6", the two rods will be really, really close for jigging performance, okay? So if I compare this Shimano Sensilite versus the Shakespeare Micro, difficult to recommend. I'm not going to recommend it, okay? Anyone who is on budget, just get the Shakespeare rod. You don't lose almost anything. You lose a little bit of sensitivity and you lose a little bit of sharp tip when you jig. That's all. If I compare it with the Daiwa Presso that also costs $60, every single component on the Daiwa Presso is superior, okay? Every component, the reel seat, the cork, the butt section, the locking nuts, the guides, oh my god. Every component on the Daiwa Presso is superior, including the blank, I think. Even though the two blanks are very different, like you cannot jig to save your life with the Daiwa Presso, and with this one you can jig and you can do everything. But this blank still feels so good on the Daiwa Presso. I don't know why, but yeah, if you compare with the Daiwa Presso, also I cannot recommend the Shimano Sensilite. But I mean, I don't want to give any spoilers, but if you compare it with more expensive rods, this is where it gets interesting. If you compare this $60 or $50 Shimano Sensilite with $100 or $150 ultralights, then all of a sudden I feel that the Shimano Sensilite becomes a great value, because I tried some $150 ultralights. They don't jig better than this Shimano, okay? They look nicer, almost anything will look nicer than this, but they don't jig better. So if you ask me to buy a $200 ultralight or this one, I'll probably just spend the $60 and jig just as good. One more thing I forgot. Some people suffer from these problems. For example, I have some pretty expensive spinning reels, and I don't mind putting a $220 Shimano Stragic on this Shakespeare rod that you can buy for $15 from Walmart, okay? I have no problem with this because, you know, I feel secure, I feel confident. I know it's a great rod, I don't care what somebody else might think, but I know some people, they will not just be seen with a Shakespeare rod. So from that perspective, if you have a nice Shimano reel like the Stragic or whatever else, then this is probably, if you want to jig and you want to use your fancy Shimano reel, this is probably also the best value that you can get from that perspective as well. Hey, already the video too long. Thank you again for watching, for spending time on my channel. If you have any question about any one of these rods, the benefits of small channel is that you have really good connection with the owner, and I reply to all my comments, all my questions, so just ask me any question about any of these rods, and I promise I will get back to you.